You are good to go, Courtney.
Okay, great. So yeah, we have a pretty packed agenda today, and an important conversation to have on the previous recommendations from the report and then new recommendations, and an update on the neurodiversity flag, and a look at the calendar for next year's meeting. But before we get to the conversation about the previous recommendations and review of those and the potential new recommendations, we have a guest presentation from board member Kate Coofman, as well as one of her colleagues. And so, Alexia, there's nothing else to announce or nothing else that got added to the agenda. Should we move right into the guest presentation?
Yep, we can move right into the guest presentation. Would you like to introduce Kate, or I can also introduce her?
I'm happy to. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So for those who haven't met Kate, Kate is a self-advocate. She's also the autism spectrum disorder.
Courtney, you just cut out. If you were speaking, we can no longer hear you.
This is Kim, the interpreter. I think she's gone.
Okay, well, while we work to get Courtney back on, I'll introduce Kate. Apologies for that. So Kate Coofman is a self-advocate, Autism Spectrum Disorders Advisory Board member, DIRFloortime practitioner, and New York State certified special education teacher, as well as the founder of Rooted Beginnings LLC, the first disabled-owned and operated business serving disabled children and their families in Western New York. Kate founded Rooted Beginnings out of a profound disconnect she experienced while working in agencies that serve disabled children and their families. Despite being dedicated to supporting the needs of disabled children, these organizations frequently overlooked or dismissed the accommodations she needed as a disabled adult professional. This gap, a system that abruptly ceased its support when children became adults, highlighted the deep shortcomings in disability care and drove Kate to build an inclusive, respectful space where neurodivergent individuals of all ages can truly thrive. Thanks, Kate, for presenting today. And Colleen, if you could pull up her presentation, that'd be great.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for the introduction, Alexia. I'm excited to provide information on DIRFloortime. It's a strength-based approach that aligns closely with the direction the state is moving in regarding greater agency and self-determination for disabled individuals, including the growing support for self-direction services. It also complements initiatives like the Neurodiversity Strength Flag, which embodies values of strength, inclusivity, empowerment, and acceptance for the neurodivergent community. DIRFloortime helps children develop essential social, emotional, and cognitive skills by focusing on their unique developmental interests and strengths, all while fostering meaningful, respectful, joy-filled relationships. This approach is not limited to young children, but it can be applied across the lifespan, benefiting individuals of all ages. Everyone can gain from the principles of DIRFloortime. It's an inclusive model that supports personal growth and connection through each stage of life. And today you are witnessing DIRFloortime in action for those of you that are here in person. This approach is all about relationships, and that is evident today in the room and online with people who are here to hear about DIRFloortime and hopefully look for some ways to find increased access for that. They're here because we built connections rooted in trust and safety and mutual growth. DIRFloortime has profoundly impacted many of those joining us today, as each person has experienced firsthand the magic of this approach. They've seen how DIRFloortime helps people feel safe enough to take risks, be vulnerable, and develop in ways they may have thought were out of reach. The relationships nurtured through DIRFloortime have allowed people to connect more deeply with themselves and others. These connections are the foundation for growth, learning, and resilience, and they are the reason DIR floor time is so impactful. Through this approach, we witness transformation that might seem impossible in other settings, as it supports not only the child, but the entire family and community. With a shortage of providers and a historically one-size-fits-all approach across New York State, it's clear that families need more diverse and holistic options. Floor Time offers just that, an approach that not only nurtures a child's potential, but also empowers families to be actively involved in their child's growth, ensuring that this process is as supportive and affirming as possible. Floor Time is an evidence-based approach to autism support that has shown significant research-backed benefits for families. It is a model that goes beyond simply managing behaviors. Instead, it's a framework that fosters meaningful growth by meeting each child where they are developmentally, respecting their unique strengths, and helping them build social, emotional, and cognitive skills through play, joy, and relationships. With the number of people being diagnosed with autism rising across New York State, families are seeking more diverse treatment options, particularly those that don't simply address behavior, but also focus on overall development and family well-being. Floor Time provides families with exactly this, a model that understands children's individual needs and helps them build critical skills for the future. Currently, New York State law only permits ABA, which is applied behavior analysis, as a billable therapy for autistic children. But many families are looking for alternatives like DIR floor time, which offers a distinct approach to development. Unlike traditional methods that often focus on prescribed behaviors, floor time centers around the child's personal growth, using play and natural interactions to foster emotional regulation, social connection, and communication. So we are going to watch a slide or a short video next. And I'm going to introduce you to Heather. Heather is a mom whose family has directly benefited from DIR floor time. And she is going to speak about how this approach transformed her daughter's developmental journey and supported their family's needs in ways that other therapies couldn't. Her experience demonstrates the unique family-centered impact of floor time and its ability to meet children where they are, building real skills through relationships.
Hi, my name is Heather Burrows, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how DIR changed things for me and my little girl. Devin was about 2 years old when they told me that she wouldn't be good at walking or talking. She would definitely never have imaginative play. They had diagnosed her with a rare genetic condition that many doctors describe as a combination of autism and epilepsy. They told me it would significantly impact her speech and motor abilities, her ability to learn. It also caused life-threatening seizures. Even putting the medical complications aside, it was difficult to process this kind of prognosis. It felt like all my hopes and dreams for my daughter were being taken away. But today, years later, I can sit here and tell you that what the doctors thought would happen didn't. We were able to reverse some things, change her path, have her grow skills that they did not believe she could do. We got to flip the script, and we did it our way. We took a different path to get to this place, but we got there. And my dreams may have shifted in their focus, but they are just as big and just as amazing as the day she was born. DIR helps families switch away from a deficit-based model that medical and educational professionals often use, instead of concentrating on what your child cannot do. You learn to embrace what makes them tick, what's important to them, and you use those as the building blocks. We can enter their world and encourage them to venture into ours. Learning to relate to others and connect in a meaningful way is by far the greatest gift we could have ever given my little girl. It will serve her better than the ABCs or multiplication tables. Not that we won't work on those, but we know what is important and we're not going to lose sight of it. Children who are disconnected from their world sometimes has an affinity for memorizing facts and details. So it follows that many therapies monopolize on that strength. But then the social supports needed to wake up and grow the social parts of their brains. They're not introduced in a natural way. I'm so glad that Devin looks at me because she wants to, that she's not dependent on a prompt or a cue. Look at me. All too often, children need these prompts, these plugged in practice memorized phrases. DIR has given us a framework for spontaneous, loving exchanges that help us feel connected as a family. It also makes the challenges we face easier to manage. And it makes Devin more likable to others. A warm, animated child who connects with the people around them have a better chance of being accepted and supported, and that is very important to us. I know that I will not always be here for Devin. DIR is helping us grow her independence and her interpersonal skills so that she will be okay when that day comes. Thank you.
I want to thank Heather for sharing that video. Is everybody awake now? Okay. DIR is supported by a growing body of research demonstrating that it is effective in supporting autistic children. Multiple randomized controlled trials have documented statistically significant improvements in social skills, emotional regulation, and communication for children using DIR floor time compared to traditional approaches. The field is evolving, and as more research emerges, we see that a developmental model may better support the needs of some children by focusing on building foundational skills like emotional regulation, social engagement, and adaptive learning in a naturalistic context. Studies are showing that for some, these approaches foster long-term developmental gains and higher levels of engagement and learning, which are essential markers of quality of life and progress. An especially meaningful finding is the reduction in parental stress associated with floor time. When parents are empowered with tools to connect deeply and joyfully with their children, stress often decreases, benefiting not only the child, but the entire family. In recent years, leading experts have recommended that autism treatments include a broader range of approaches beyond traditional behavioral models. A 2020 article in the Journal of the American Medical Association, Intervention Recommendations for Children with Autism in Light of a Changing Evidence Base, highlights the importance of offering relationship-based treatments like floor time. This guidance reflects a shift toward more holistic, flexible interventions that meet children's diverse needs and empower families to engage in the therapeutic process in meaningful ways. So I'm going to read, you can skip to the next slide because it's, I am going to just read a little bit about Carissa and share her story. As we heard from Heather in her video, the benefits of floor time can be transformative for families when they are accessible. Heather shared her experience of how floor time helped her build a strong, joyful connection with her child, reduced her stress, and provided developmental support that truly met her family's needs. However, for many families in New York, access to floor time remains limited. Carissa is a former town historian and late diagnosed autistic advocate who has shared her personal experiences to foster awareness and understanding about autism. She was featured in the April 2024 edition of Buffalo Healthy Living, where she detailed her journey as an autistic adult. Carissa is a devoted mother to her son Declan, who is also on the spectrum. Together, they inspire others by embracing their unique perspectives and strengths. Yet Carissa's story reveals a challenging reality. Despite her hope and commitment, she has faced significant barriers to accessing floor time for her son. The lack of providers and the high cost without the support of insurance reimbursement have left her family struggling to reach a service that she knows could make a difference. Floor time is not just an alternative approach. It's a research-backed, evidence-based intervention that has shown to foster developmental growth, improve parent-child relationships, and support mental health. Families like Carissa's deserve the freedom to choose proven therapies that work best for their children, but financial and systemic barriers make this impossible. No family should have to face these kinds of obstacles, especially when it comes to accessing evidence-based support for their child's future and well-being. DIR floor time isn't just about the child. It's about creating a strong, supportive network for the entire family. Families who have access to floor time report a deeper understanding of their children's needs, stronger connections, and reduced stress. This approach empowers families to respond more effectively to their children, creating an environment where each child feels understood, supported, and capable of reaching their potential. With close to 400 DIR floor time practitioners listed in the DIR floor time directory in New York State, allowing these practitioners to bill for their services would exponentially increase access to these life-changing supports for children and families across the state. By making floor time accessible to all families, we can foster greater equity in autism support and ensure that more children and families can benefit from this personalized, relationship-based approach. Oops, there's one more slide. I think there was one before that. Yeah, that was it. So as I conclude my presentation today, I just want to highlight something that aligns with the philosophy behind DIR floor time and the vision we are working toward for autism support in New York State. The creation of the New York State Neurodiversity Strength Flag by Josh Mirsky, which represents tolerance, acceptance, and understanding for the neurodivergent community. The flag's mission is clear: to create a world where neurodivergent people are noticed, heard, and respected. It values inclusivity, empowerment, dedication, and loyalty, and resonate deeply with the principles of DIR floor time. This strength-based approach doesn't just focus on behaviors to change, but on nurturing and celebrating the unique strengths of each child, fostering an environment where children can grow emotionally, socially, and cognitively at their own pace and in their own way. Floor time empowers children by recognizing and honoring their developmental differences and strengths, which align seamlessly with the values of the Neurodiversity Strength Flag. Both aim to support neurodivergent individuals by focusing on what makes them unique, providing them with the tools they need to succeed in ways that are tailored to their needs. So I just wanted to thank Josh again for creating the flag, and that it really embodies the ideals of DIR floor time as well. And together we can make New York a leader in inclusivity, empowering neurodivergent individuals, and ensuring that we are seen, heard, and respected. Nothing about us without us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. I believe Chair Burke has a question regarding your presentation, if we're able to unmute her.
Hi there. So hopefully you can hear me.
Yep.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Kate, for the presentation. I think it was very educational for all of us. I love the strengths-based approach. I did have a question, which is you were indicating there's about 400 practitioners statewide. I guess it's really two questions. Number one, I'm interested in knowing just a little bit more about the training and certification that they go through. And then secondly, if it's not being reimbursed, I'm assuming you mean Medicaid doesn't reimburse it, but are people paying out of pocket for the service, or do some insurers cover it?
People are paying out of pocket if they want the service currently. Unless, like, for example, I provide early intervention and I'm a DIR floor time practitioner. So the children that I serve, the families I serve, those children do receive DIR floor time. But it's not a billable service.
Okay, that's helpful. Were there other
And
questions
there
from the board?
are trainings.
No, go ahead. The other training, I was curious about that too.
Yes, there are two larger agencies that provide those trainings. One is ICDL, the International Council on Development and Learning, and Autism. ICDL seems to have a little more. That's where I received my training, was through ICDL.
Great, very helpful. Thank you. Are there other questions from the board?
Yes.
Go ahead, Steve, and then we'll have Kristen.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Yes, there's a great documentary film from about a decade and a half ago called Autism the Musical. And they use the DIR4time. I spent some time with them way back when, just after the film came out. And if people are interested, it's a great start to watch that.
Thank you, Steve.
Great.
Kristen?
For the presentation. Can you give some examples of the types of exercises or techniques that are used? I was very interested in the parent that you showed the video of, and her talking about some of the things that her daughter sort of learned or the skills that she acquired. But can you tell us a little bit about the exercises that you do when you're doing, for example, EI service provision and you're incorporating the floor time?
I play. So we meet kids where they're at. And, when we think about early intervention, we think about children under 5. The most important thing for them is play. There's a wonderful podcast. Is it Choose Play? I Choose Play. Is that what it's called? I Chose Play. I Choose Play. What's the name? We Choose Play is a wonderful podcast if people enjoy listening to podcasts that talk about DIR floor time. But the D stands for developmental, the I is individual, and the R is relationship. So we look at the whole child. Many people use like so for example, I work with an OT typically and somebody else, so we look at the whole child. We don't just look at like the behavior as something that needs to be extinguished. We look at that as like a little tip of the iceberg, and that there's a lot going on underneath there, and the child is trying to tell us something. A lot of focus on regulation and understanding children's nervous systems and how to keep them regulated so that they can learn.
And then Charlie online.
Yeah, again, thanks for the presentation. It's amazing how much you still learn. As a dad of 2 boys with autism, I constantly search the web. So thank you for bringing this to my attention. I was fortunate to see that there's someone actually locally in my area that does this, which I'll look him up. But I'm wondering, how do you approach getting something like this approved inside a self-direction budget as individualized directed goods and services? I don't know that process, and I don't even know if that's feasible. But how would someone go about that?
So I think that's more of a question for OPWDD, and I do apologize, I don't have an answer offhand, but I will take that back and send out that response to the board.
Yeah, that'd be appreciated. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And then
I
Courtney.
think that
Oh, go ahead.
No, I wanted to say that the timing of the presentation is really good, because if we're going through the report and the recommendations this afternoon, what Charlie just brought up about the flexibility under self-direction to potentially add something like this, that could be something that we could be recommending, of, allowing more flexibility in the exploration of using therapies like this, if a parent so chooses, or an advocate so chooses, in their self-direction budget.
Yeah, great point. So it looks like we don't have any more questions. If you want to move on to the next part.
Sure, yeah. Well, thank you again, Kate. That was really, really helpful. We appreciate it. So the next thing on the agenda is going through the previous recommendations of the board and looking at some potential new recommendations. And Alexia and I had looked at some of this beforehand, and I think she's going to take us through it today. So thanks, Alexia. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so I'm just going to briefly go over the what this is going to look like. So we're going to go over the previous recommendations. It's going to have the title recommendation that was listed in the report, a spot for state actions, board actions, and then decisions. State actions is really just the tip of the iceberg, especially looking at my state agency partners here. This will be sent to every ex officio for you to review, adding what your state agency has been doing. So this is really just the basic level. If I listed everything the state has done in response, we'd be at probably 50 plus slides, but it will be fully written out in the full report. But for the essence of time, it's just summarized into that bullet. And then board actions overviews the presentations or actions and topics that the board has talked about or taken a part of that have supported that recommendation. And there's a decision where I've just listed some potential suggestions, but that's really up to board members. If you have new ideas, focus areas, if you think that one of the ones that we might want to potentially sunset is something you want to expand to continue, please feel free to share that. This is really the time to share your thoughts, engage with the other board members, and expand upon our previous recommendations. And then there are 3 new proposed recommendations, which I am just going to briefly mention now because some of our previous ones could get put into the new ones, which I'll go over in a lot more detail. But those 3 new recommendations are: 1, strengthening and maintaining the direct care workforce; 2, supporting neurodiversity self-advocacy and awareness; and 3, health equity and access to healthcare for people with ASD, with a focus area on dental services, women's health services, and education of clinical professionals. And I do excuse me if I have a cough or two in between this. I'm getting over a cold. Next slide, please. Okay. So number 1, supporting people with ASD living in the community. It had a focus area of housing for people with ASD, employment opportunities, eligibility, and community supports. Some of the state actions taken since we released this recommendation: Access VR has done a lot, NDM, the statewide and regional housing collaboratives grant, and we had a resource catalog created. The board also had multiple presentations related to this recommendation in 2023 and 2024. Some from OPWDD and non-certified housing options, one from Assemblymember Burdick, in collaboration with NYSED on their work on employment, and then others from New York Alliance for Inclusion, NYAI and New York Housing Resource Center presentation on housing grants. And the board's talked about housing a lot in our open board discussion. So for this one, the decision for members is: do we remove this? Do we keep this? Do we want to specify or expand due to kind of how large this one is? We could change the focus area and keep it, because it is pretty large, talking about housing, employment, eligibility, community supports, all in one. So I want to open it up to board members, especially Chair Burke, if you have opening comments on that. Here's some thoughts.
Well, I do think it's a good suggestion because those are pretty big areas of housing and employment, about the potential of separating them out so that they get their own attention rather than all being lumped together. Although you could keep them all in the same recommendation as they are now, but I think they just get a little bit more attention if they are separated out. So I open it up to others to weigh in.
Yeah, this is Charlie. I mean, I've always felt that housing is an issue all to itself, and it's such a universal problem, and it's such a monumental issue that I think that should have a category all to itself.
I agree with Charles on that.
Yeah, this is Mike Harrison from the Department of Health. I was going to agree with that as well, just based on what the comments were like when housing has come up and how much more there probably is to do.
Are there nodding heads or agreement with that we should potentially segment that out?
Yep, it seems like we have an agreement that number one should be supporting people with ASD living in the community with a focus area just on housing.
Great.
Okay, great. Number two was increasing collaboration between state agencies, and it had a focus area on training for professionals and cross-agency coordination. Some of the state actions include the implementation of CANs, cross-systems engagement and dialogue, been improvements in the cross-agency coordination between OMH and OPWDD and a lot of the O agencies, home-based crisis intervention, which is an OMH and CDD collaboration. The SUNY Upstate Children's Specialized Multidisciplinary Inpatient Unit is a great collaboration between multiple agencies. Project ECHO 988, the $1 billion investment into OMH, which OPWDD is partnering with on many elements, because we do know, we've talked about a lot, the increase in dual diagnosis of someone having DD and also having mental health concerns, and how sometimes those get siloed between the two systems. So OMH and OPWDD are doing a lot of work in collaboration with CDD and a lot of other state agencies to fill those gaps. And in the board actions, we had a couple of presentations related to this. Dr. Jill Pettinger, who's a board member as well, presented on strategies to support complex cases with dual mental health diagnoses and cross-agency collaboration. And we also had our Chief Disability Officer, Kim Hill, come present on her office and how one of her focuses is to look at the disparities between agencies and try and fix that communication. So the decision here, the suggestion was potentially sunset. There has been a significant amount of state actions. There's more than what's listed here. It would have really filled the slide. So I wanted to open up to folks if we want to sunset this one, maybe retarget it, or we can continue it because it is an ongoing need that state agencies do need to continue collaborating, and we can continue recommending that.
And I'll play the contrarian here and weigh in and say that I think we should keep it. I think that we have seen some progress in cross-agency collaboration, but there's room for a lot more. I see a lot of individuals with complex needs that span across agencies, and I know the emphasis here has been a lot about the O agencies and OPWDD and OMH, but I think that there's a lot more collaboration that can happen with the Department of Health for people's healthcare needs as well. So I'm going to weigh in and say that I think we keep it on there and even add to it to specify that perhaps there's more agencies that could be brought in to focus on cross-agency collaboration.
Yeah, that sounds great. Do any other board members have input to that?
I agree. I agree.
You getting some nods in the room, Courtney?
Yeah. And do we have like a mechanism to also monitor, like going forward? Like, yes, we've had this increased collaboration, but how do we make sure that that collaboration continues? Oops. Oh, yeah. How do we make sure that, is this on?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do we make sure that collaboration continues? Yes, it's been achieved, but how do we make sure that in 5 years from now, it's not going to fall apart?
I think the mechanisms are in place, but
Yeah.
whether or not they're impactful enough to really change the direction of individuals not receiving the services that they need, I think that still needs to play out.
And I think with Kim Hill, the state advocate being the head of the most integrated setting coordinating council, that's really a good venue for those conversations to happen, and to have her periodically report back to the board would be a good way to encourage that is happening.
Yeah, that's a great idea to have Kim report back from the MISC.
This is Chris Triano from State Ed. I agree with the recommendations for number 2. I apologize, but I just wanted to go back to number 1 if I can. Well, I agreed that we should the focus should be on the housing component. Is that mean we won't be looking at focusing on employment opportunities, eligibility, and community supports, or is there an opportunity to have those as additional recommendations?
It's a great question. Yeah, and I think I think they're worthy. Either we make them as subcategories like A, B, C to make them stand out, or we have them as their own set recommendation. I don't think I have a strong opinion whether we do it as A, B, C, or whether we give as 1, 2, 3, as long as they're called out enough so that they're individually considered important enough to be reporting on and taking action upon.
That sounds great. I would support that path forward as well. I just don't want to lose sight of those other areas, significantly important.
I agree.
Thank you, Chris.
So I
That's
guess
a good comment.
Yeah, it's a great comment. And it's always, I don't mind going backwards if we need to. But going back to the second one here, I think it sounded like we had some consensus and some thoughts on how to report on the cross-agency collaboration, that we really feel that's very important.
Okay, so sounds like we will continue this one. Do we want to keep the same focus area, or just leave it as, do we want to keep training for professionals in there? Because that kind of does get pulled into one of the newer ones. So we could just focus on cross-agency coordination.
What is the newer one? It's about training and
it's health equity and access to healthcare for people with ASD, with a focus area that includes education of clinical professionals.
okay. Yeah, I think that's a good place for that, for the education of clinical professionals to be in that one.
Great. Okay, next slide, please. So number 3, establishing family support groups, focus area, awareness and acceptance of ASD and eligibility. So the state actions, there's been many focus groups, surveys, and public comment periods by OPWDD. There's also a family stakeholder meeting regularly. There's also a podcast that's been created by self-advocates at OPWDD that talks about different things like how to get comfortable with grocery shopping, how to talk to people at the different grocery stores about the resources they have there for you, things that are really on the ground impacting people's day-to-day lives. OPWDD has also established an Office of Advocacy, and currently there is an ombudsman program being created. I think it'll be launching within the next couple of months. That will provide a place for families and individuals to talk to outside of OPWDD with complaints, concerns, education, information, all that good stuff. And then additionally, the neurodiversity flag funding that was provided by the state to the board. And the board in 2022 had a presentation on unique challenges that communities of color face. We also expanded our self-advocacy advisory group and are still actively recruiting because the board does recognize and values that self-advocates are really the core of what we're doing and the message we're trying to get out there. The neurodiversity flags in 2023, the contest when we originally started it, and now expanding the flags across the state, which there's a slide later in the presentation we'll share of the efforts that have been done there. And there's a compilation of a very large list of family groups that are in the addendum of the autism, the report that will come out of this. There is one from our last report, and then I've been compiling pages, social media, different groups since then. and we'll go over all the appendixes right at the end of this. But if anyone listening has a family group or is a part of a family group, we want to make sure we list as many as possible. So please reach out to the board so we can include you in our addendum. This one, I think, is easier to pull into the new recommendation of supporting neurodiversity, self-advocacy, and awareness, and sunsetting the establishing family support groups, but making it clear that that family group list will never leave the report and will continue to get updated. And then I did want to also ask the board if we think posting that family support group list as a separate link on the board's webpage would be helpful. So it's not just in the report, but on the page as well. So it's more present to families and individuals.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that.
Hey, Alexia, I just have one question there. So regarding all your postings and everything that's done, I know we talked a little bit prior about social media presence and what OPWDD is doing there. Have you gathered any metrics, and we can talk about it another time, to see, you know, how successful social media is with OPWDD, how many people are coming to the site, what they're spending time on? Is there any data for that?
I would have to talk to our communications department and data team just to get specific data on our website. I know that since we've done the More Than Work campaign to recruit folks into the workforce, there's been a significant uptick in site visits, and we have been tracking that very closely on the recruitment and retention side. And that doesn't just send folks to OPWDD, it sends to providers and every potential job in their area that they could work in direct care. But I can pull that for you, Charlie.
All right, thanks. Because if we're going to do all the time to put these resources together, which are great resources, just want to make sure that it's getting to the proper, you know, enough eyes are coming to see it.
Yep, thank you. Great. So number 4, focus on wellness by supporting proper exercise and nutrition. State actions, the New York State Parks Autism Nature Trail was completed. Special Olympics continues to be funded and expanded programming. Additionally, the podcast I just mentioned. And then OTDA also has a nutrition outreach and education program. And the Get Outdoors and Get Together Day is a big initiative that multiple state agencies take a part of. And then the board actions, we did have the New York State Parks present on the Autism Nature Trail. And decision-wise, the previous report does recommend a nutrition program be posted on the OPWDD website, which has not been done. We can continue this recommendation if wanted, but I do think we might want to add a little more specifics because the keyword of nutrition and exercise might be a little overarching, and if we could focus maybe on areas where board members think would be the most important, that might give us a little more direction, but also open to any ideas anyone has.
I think the nutrition part is so important, but I think it's a monumental task. I mean, I visited group homes and I look in their cupboards and it really is ridiculous what they put in there to feed these young men and women. But I also realize the cost issues and restrictions, and everybody has different diets. But I would love to have some kind of initiative to talk more about nutrition in certified homes, and maybe and they may be there already, like prepare suggested lists of food and suggested lists of foods to avoid.
Yeah, that's a good idea. At least it has suggested, it's not mandated, and it's educational so people will see what's good or bad. It's a good idea, Charlie.
Sorry, Alexi, I was a little late. I'm sorry. Do we have a hard copy of the plan? Because I can't really see very well on the board.
We don't.
Okay.
You want to move up there?
What?
You want to move up there?
I can't hear you.
Do you want to move up there?
It's okay. I'll listen. I can't see it from here.
Okay. If you get closer, it might be a little easier.
Good listening.
Yeah.
Lex?
Thank you. Just on the nutrition piece, for people who are living in the community or transitioning maybe, as they become young adults, thinking about living in integrated settings in the community, it might be beneficial to have a little bit of information and also links to OTDA's web pages about the economic benefits that are available to people who are eligible to access nutrition benefits, SNAP benefits in particular. And I agree, this goes to the overall cost of food and how far do your SNAP benefits really reach? But as a first step for people who may not be receiving SNAP benefits, but who could be eligible, at least for some benefit, it might be useful that they have a direct link from OPWDD's website to OTDA to be able to find out more about the benefits, how to go about finding out if you're eligible, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great idea, Kristen. So it sounds like we want to continue this, but potentially add in some focus areas, maybe make the overall recommendation just supporting exercise and nutrition with a focus on certified homes, with a recommendation to provide suggestive lists of food to try and avoid, and then additionally a link to OTDA's web pages on economic benefits and on the OPWDD website. Is there any other focus areas you would want to add into this one? I feel like we only have one or two.
Actually, I was thinking about it. Water safety and swimming. Would this, because that's, again, drowning, accidental drowning is the #1 cause of death in the autism community under 18. With New York Swims and all this other stuff going on, swimming has both, you have the survival part, but you also have the exercise and you have the, the recreational component of it too. And really there is becoming in the aquatics industry, there is a lot more discussion about, around autism and developmental disabilities and inclusion. So would that be something appropriate to put in there to kind of help tie some of these learn to swim programs, stuff like that into that kind of lifelong exercise? Because I know the exercise, I swim, I don't run, I don't walk, I go to the pool and swim for 2 hours every day. So,
And a lot of autistic children are now wandering to water, and if someone who can't swim and never could learn, I think it's a good skill. If someone never was able to learn.
I think certainly adding it as an example of something that can be a lifelong activity and has other benefits of safety. So I don't have a problem with sort of adding in there as an example of one way people can achieve this goal.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. If any board members have any concerns with that, or please let us know, but we'll add that in as a focus area, especially knowing that it's the #1 cause of death for children with autism.
Yeah. I would also like to throw in there too, if we could expand the nature trail program, because I think right now there's only one. It's out in Western New York. I think that would be something that could be expanded upon on some other state forests and other state forests, like Pack Forest, which is up in Warrensburg, New York, would be a great place for one.
I know that one challenge that a lot of autistic families have when families of autistic children have in trying to get them out and exercising is many of our wonderful inclusive parks don't have any fencing. So for kiddos that elope, those are not safe spaces for those families. So I don't know if like that would fit in somewhere there, just like that awareness around like if we're going to be building 100, 200, $500,000 playgrounds and areas for all children that they need to be fenced so that that children can't elope. So I don't know if that.
I guess is this section health and wellness in general?
Exercise and nutrition.
Okay, because I guess mental health would be a different section. This is physical health. I was just asking, because I want to make sure we get that.
Okay, so it sounds like we have some direction on this one, and I just want to note again, if anyone thinks of anything after this, just being quiet right now and doesn't want to speak up, please email myself or the board with, especially if you're a board member and have ideas here, please email me with your ideas and we'll make sure they're ran by everyone and included in the report. Okay, next slide, please. So the next two are kind of similar, related to telehealth and assistive tech. So number 5, better supporting telehealth services throughout New York State. So the state actions, there have been some COVID era flexibilities made permanent into law. And then the board actions, we did have a presentation this year with Jim Coofman from OPWDD on the waiver changes to assist with telehealth within the OPWDD system. And then I'm just going to also read number 6 so we can talk about them together. Actually, with number 5, with telehealth, now that we're a couple years out of COVID, do we think this is recommendations to still keep, or do you think we should sunset it or maybe improve it?
Improve it.
You said that a little fast, actually.
Apologies. Do you think we should improve this?
What's the recommendation?
Oh, better supporting telehealth services throughout New York State.
Improve it, obviously.
If I can just speak really quick, I think that the world is going in that direction anyway. And I think that people are using technology to communicate more and more or to receive assistance. And I think that it's important that at least we don't be on the cutting edge necessarily, but you don't want to be so far behind that we're not supporting people at the level that they could be supported with the existing technology.
Okay. Very good point.
And I think telehealth is being used even in more ways and more venues than it has been in the past. I don't think it's reached its full potential yet, because there's more that's being done around services being provided in the home remotely. So I think there's still room for improvement.
And I think with the advent of artificial intelligence, not to say that it's going to be usable today, but I think that there should be a focus on that for the future, because that could provide some significant support for individuals to make them more independent.
Do you think the AI would fit better with number 6?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any more specific, because it sounds like we all are very supportive of continuing to support telehealth throughout different agencies and different services, but are there any specific recommendations or improvements the board members would want to suggest, or just an overarching theme?
I think continuing to fund technology is an important component. Once you get some evidence behind it and it's shown to be effective, I think, not everyone's going to be able to pay for that privately. And I think that if it creates more independence, more choice, more freedom to make decisions, I think it's important that it be supported.
I think we also want to mention the telehealth focus, not just on physical, but especially mental health. Because it's such an issue in the autism community, and quite frankly, it's a lot easier to go to therapy or see a psychiatrist by telehealth than something physical where they actually have to look at your body.
Yeah.
So I think emphasizing the mental health piece of it.
Yeah, and then I was going to say maybe we modify it instead of better support to expand support. Because that's kind of sad.
Yeah, I was going to say like increased support or access, increased access would be important.
Alexa, the other place that we may want to focus is to make sure that all community residences have telehealth capabilities, right? I know that since the beginning of COVID, there's been a significant expansion, but I don't know that it's permeated all of the CRs at this point. So that may be another place that we want to focus attention.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because we have folks living in certified residences or community residences, and could have a mental health telehealth visit, but don't have the correct technology or to be able to attend. That could be a block. Okay, so it sounds like we'll continue this one, add some more specific focuses in, and change the wording so it's more expanding and increasing instead of just supporting. Does that sound okay to you, Courtney?
Yeah, that sounds great. Good suggestion.
Thank you. So number 6 is studying how assistive technology can be more utilized. The focus area here was community supports and housing for people with ASD, which has kind of been touched on. So the state actions, there have been a lot of waiver changes to allow for more assistive tech and utilizing assistive tech to increase independence in housing for people with ASD. We've seen a lot of nonprofit providers get really creative in what they're working on and trying to see how we can copy that and use those great practices throughout the state. And board actions, same presentation, Jim Coofman presented on a range of topics, which also included utilizing technology for community supports. And then Dr. Yu in July 2023, who's a board member, presented on some technology that may assist those with autism and DD. But I think the decision-wise, and this is not up to me, but I think there's a lot more we can do here and continue this recommendation, especially with the ever-growing technology field. And as you mentioned, Patrick, the AI is really increasing, and how can that be helpful to people with autism to be more integrated in the community? We could also combine 5 and 6 to be use assistive tech and telehealth more fully, but after the discussion we just had, I think we should scrap that one and focus more on how do we want to continue this recommendation if there aren't any specifics. I think in the previous board report, a tech fair was proposed, but there wasn't many details under that. So if anyone has ideas on what type of tech fair, if it would be for providers or for individuals or families who it would be targeted at, that could help the report be a little more targeted.
I think
And I
this
think,
is a big.
let's see, let me ask, sorry.
No, Courtney, go first, please. You're the chair.
Oh, thanks, whoever I interrupted, sorry. No, I just was going to ask a question. When you read the recommendation, just because I don't have it in front of me, it's research. Is that the term that's used, research support? Because I think it's more than that. It's supporting, the use of it when it's proven to be effective.
No, so this is not the research one. This is study how assistive technology can be utilized more fully with the focus area community supports and housing for people with ASD. Excuse me if I misspoke.
Okay, so study. Yeah, I think it's more than that. It's utilizing it when it's proven to be effective. Because that just sounds like, okay, a study, and then, I want it to be a little bit more action oriented.
I was going to say, I think given the number of people in the autism world who are non-speaking or non-verbal, it's so important to have this expand, because those people, when given proper technology, have a voice and can communicate. And I've seen so many of these people who communicate with technology that we need to expand that ability so more people can actually have their voices heard.
Yeah, I would like to see that as well. I know in the field that I work in early intervention, it's a real struggle for families to get access to communication devices for their kids, and that communication really it's a human right. And I see a lot of children that end up with co-occurring conditions because they aren't able to communicate effectively because they haven't been given a way to communicate effectively. So I think a lot more study around the types of training that our SLPs are getting, so that we can get communication devices into the hands of these children when they're young, because they're navigating their parents' cell phones very well, and they're not able to, they don't have a communication device because of the red tape. So figuring out how to get them a way to communicate would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think adding in a focus area on communication specifically could be a good addition to this recommendation.
Just on the assistive technology as it relates to communication devices, most of the technology is very old. The standardized technology that's currently being supported is very old. It's very clunky. It's not as useful as it could be. I know a few folks are working on updating that and making it more generalized so that it can be used on many devices. I think is the direction that needs to happen. But obviously, the technology needs to come to fruition and grow and mature. So,
Well, I agree with the suggestion, Patrick, of AI. I think it's not there yet.
It's not there.
The problem is AI still is the way, I mean, I make a Google search and their new AI generator gives me the dumbest results. So I think that if we need to wait till AI is really that reliable before we introduce it as a communication method for people on the spectrum.
I wasn't even talking about AI. I was just talking about the standardized devices that are out there that people are accessing have not been updated to the newer technologies that are out there. But I agree that AI would be potentially, as it grows, it would be much more
You
effective.
mentioned AI before, that's why I wanted to just add that. And I agree, we need to focus on updating the technology.
So I know at least for children, there is a lot of different technology, and that's the problem. Like, so what'll happen is, somebody will recommend Dynabox for somebody, and then somebody else will recommend something else for the child. So like, there is no consistency and there is no one size fits all. So people really need to be trained, and not just be handing out speech devices to kids when they don't even know if they can even navigate the device, I guess. So like, they're out there, but people don't know how to use them.
And it's not generalizable, is really what I was saying. It doesn't go between devices, you can't.
Well, and everybody needs something different. So like, yeah.
Yeah, and
Everybody's not going to use the same device.
And to kind of tie this into some of the other recommendations is there also needs to be training for people like first responders, disaster responders, in this type of technology, because we've just encountering it out in the field. Luckily, I know about it because of my own, my advocacy stuff. But when you encounter somebody who's using a device, a lot of first responders don't know how to react to it. Or if the person lost their device in like a fire or a disaster, which is becoming more and more, I forget the statistics, but they've replaced a lot of communication devices down in North Carolina and Florida because of the hurricanes. There's just not an understanding. So even if you have the device, you're not able to get the help that you need. So I think that kind of ties into some of the other recommendations around training.
Okay, great. I'm glad that we had a lot of feedback on that one. We'll work to expand it and add more focus areas in. Next slide, please. Okay. Number 7, increasing the number of clinical professionals serving individuals with ASD with a focus area on training for professionals, community supports, collaboration on research. State actions, there have been medical grand rounds by the DOH and prior OPWDD commissioner, which was an introduction to working with people with IDD across healthcare settings in New York State. There's also a research institute list included in the autism report appendix. And just like the suggestion for the family groups list, I was wondering if the board would want to also link that on their webpage separate from the report so it's more easily accessible, excuse me. And then additionally, there have been a positive increase in the OPWDD recruitment and retention, especially in the clinical field. And the board actions, today's presentation was relative to this recommendation and talking about community supports and clinical professionals serving folks with ASD and different options. And then Mike had presented previously on the training for emergency response personnel. Then we had a presentation by Adrienne Mazot from OPWDD on workforce initiatives and the increase in clinical staff hirings. And then Dr. Jill Pettinger additionally presented in May 2024 on complex cases and the collaboration between OMH and OPWDD. So for this one, it is pretty broad in its focus areas, but obviously we want to, with the number of people with autism increasing, we want to increase the number of clinical professionals serving them. So we could combine it with the new recommendation, which is health equity and access to healthcare for people with ASD, with the focus area of education of clinical professionals. We could keep it, we could sunset it, Just want to open this one up to the board.
Well, I certainly don't want to sunset because I think the education of professionals is really important, and there's also such workforce challenges. So I rule out sunsetting, but maybe others who can sort of see the two recommendations at the same time might have suggestions if there is an opportunity to combine, and if not, we can keep them separate.
Alexia, I had put my hand up, but maybe you didn't see it. This is Jill, and I do think this one makes sense to combine with the new new recommendation that we're putting forward around health. I think there's a lot of that tie to the preparation of professionals and increasing the bandwidth and capacity, I think is really critical area that we need to continue a great deal of effort on.
Thank you, Jill.
I would just add that like increasing the diversity of the supports that in that area is important too, because in my own little research I did, we've been relying pretty heavily on like the behavioral model, like when, at least at these meetings. So like, when we're thinking about these recommendations and increasing trainings for clinicians, that we need to diversify those trainings. So they're not just getting like one lens.
I find in my work as an attorney that so many professionals don't know how to work with children on the spectrum, and there's a lot of issues in the schools. You know, I'm constantly, as a special ed attorney, going to schools and being like, this person has no training. They don't know how to work with a kid with autism. I found that yesterday from a friend of mine. She was substitute teaching. They said, oh, you're going to be the one-on-one for this autistic kid. Didn't give her the IEP, didn't give her any information. So I think that's a training. And following up, that's an area we need to expand the training, because so many people in the schools and the mental health system don't know what they're dealing with. And then following up on what Mike said with the first responders, we have the ongoing issue with the police. I do police trainings in Westchester, but there's always issues with police and people with autism. It's a nationwide issue. It's almost at a crisis level, the law enforcement interactions with people with autism. And part of it is these officers are not trained properly. They're trained, grab your gun, make the person feel scared, and then the person with autism reacts.
I agree with you 100%. We find that school districts we work with, they're really not prepared to work, especially the more complex the child is. And they're keeping them inside the school district, which is what everybody wants in the community. But you have to have professionals that are able to support those individuals. And I don't think that right now the training is at a level where that's happening in a meaningful way for the individuals that are being served.
So that actually just gave me an idea. So this one is written as increasing the number of clinical professionals serving individuals with ASD. We could change it to increasing the number of professionals and then make the focus area clinical, emergency, and school-based potentially. So it covers the areas that everyone spoke to.
School and clinical will have some overlap, obviously.
Yeah.
I do want to say though, like, we really should make sure though, as we develop these trainings, that actual autistic people are involved in both the development and the training. As I guess that's one of my biggest frustrations as a professional, a national level expert. I'm oftentimes not included in the development of these trainings by like national organizations or state agencies, stuff like that. And that's a whole component that's completely missed, is that lived experience that needs to kind of be put into it. So I do think we need to put a very strong worded thing saying that that is necessary for the development of any of these programs.
Nothing about us without us.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so we will keep this one, but edit it to focus more specifically on training, and expand that to not just focus on clinical.
And the training should not only be of school-age children. I know a lot of the conversation is that, but the training should be, more than just for school-age children.
And I'll actually be honest, there needs, especially with the first responders, there needs to be a bigger focus on adults.
Of course.
Because the only training they get is about kids. And like I've literally been saved by the fact that I was wearing my badge one night when I got pulled over on a traffic stop. So that's something that is really important that we need to make sure that adults, teens are also included.
Well, and
I would,
was going to say the first responders, it's even more of an adult focus than children, because law enforcement interactions are more likely to be with adults than with children.
Yes.
I was just gonna say, I would like to see that. I agree with Mike on that, like the focus really on adults. And I mean, speaking from my own lived experience of working for agencies that were serving disabled children, but did not accommodate me as an adult. That's a big gap with our agencies in New York State. We have people that are getting paid and making good money, and they're supposed to be supporting families and children that are disabled, but they're not supporting the adults. So I think that is critical.
Thank you for all your comments. So it sounds like nothing else on that one. We would move on to number 8. Engage in cutting edge research around ASC with a focus area on training for professionals and collaboration on research. State actions, IBR, the Institute for Basic Research, has research and ongoing work. They have an ex officio member on this board, Dr. J. Helen Yu. The Jervis Clinic that they support, annual Rare Disease Day, which is the first one, was held this year. And grants and funding into research through multiple state agencies related to autism and developmental disabilities. And the board actions in July of last year, Dr. Yu presented on a bunch of clinical research trials in ASD. It was a really interesting presentation. And then October of this year, of 2023, excuse me, that's typed wrong. There was a presentation on the Autism Cost Study Report. And then in 2022, we reviewed the exploratory spatial analysis of autism rates in New York school districts, the role of sociodemographic and language differences study. And so the decision point for this, obviously up to whatever the board members would like, but my suggestion was we continue this as there's always ongoing research, and the board can probably do more on this recommendation.
Yep, agreed.
Lexi, I know we're going to talk about 2025 meetings a little bit later in the agenda, but I do think it would be beneficial to hear at least once a year from IBR representatives about new initiatives or any particularly interesting and compelling research that's been conducted or new findings, that sort of thing.
It's a great idea.
That's a great idea, Kristen, and we can support.
Because not only does it educate the board on what's going on, is sometimes they have ongoing studies that we can get out to the public for folks that would want to take part in it. It's a really good idea. Okay, so it sounds like everyone agrees that this should continue, and we need to continue focusing on research and investing time and money into that. Okay, next slide, please. So these two are both were included in the last report, but they were basically completed at that point. So number 9, review the impact of New York's systemic therapeutic assessment resources and treatment, New York START, in-home supports for individuals with ASD, with a focus area on community supports. That was reviewed in the last report fully. It has become and expanded into CSIDD. So the decision suggestion here would be to sunset and remove it because that has been done.
I would support removing it.
Great. I won't take up any more time on that one. So similarly to 9, and Mike can speak to this if you'd like, 10 was New York Citizen Preparedness Corps training for residents should include information specific to people with developmental disabilities on state actions. It is completed. Mike actually provided edits, and the Corps has committed to further updating this training as guidance changes. And I have contacts over there so the board can continue working with them. And they're also within the OPWDD realm, there is an agency-wide emergency management plan, preparedness plan, new regulation as of this year to better support our providers and folks out in the community. And then board actions, obviously I just mentioned board member Mike Tripodi presented previously on these updates, and he's worked with DHSES to include this information in there. So the decision here would be to sunset because it is included, with the promise of ongoing communication.
Yeah, I would support that.
Yeah, I'd say as long as we have the caveat that in the other recommendations that we include further training for disaster responders and Department of Homeland Security specific. The Citizen Preparedness Course was updated. Still haven't seen the book yet, but I think that's coming. But yeah, as long as we keep we need to be more focused on the on disaster responders and the emergency management focused.
Yeah, I think we can definitely do that, especially within recommendation number 7, making sure that there's a focus solely on that. Okay, great. Barring any more comments, next slide, please. Okay, so these two were new as of the last report. So number 11, the New York State Autism Board suggests that New York State agencies take concrete steps to ensure that policy decisions should include consideration of equal access to service for all New Yorkers. To help further this goal, agency leaders should establish decision-making processes that solicit input from stakeholders representing service recipients from communities of color that lack equitable access to services. State actions, there has been a lot done here. Within the OPWDD Georgetown partnership, there have been 12 regional provider forums, a provider organizational self-assessment. There are ongoing listening sessions for people with DD and their families to share their needs related to DEI and cultural and linguistic competence. And the OPWDD DEI team has a vision plan and an action plan. And the board actions, we had our DEI presentation in 2022, and then we also had a parent and provider, Daniele Sturdivant, present on the challenges the communities of color face with support, emphasizing cultural humility and the role professionals can play. And then we also had a presentation from Dr. Pigeon on the OPWDD 5-year plan and its goals included within to consider equal access to services. I think I might want to read 12 because it's similarly related before we make decisions, because we could combine these two together to be a more overall diversity, equity, and inclusion focus, and then make these focus areas. So number 12 recommends that New York State agencies review their service delivery systems to determine if services are being delivered in an equitable manner and inform the public of the results. Wherever data indicates an equitable distribution of services exists, agencies should review relevant policies and procedures with the goal of improving access to service for underserved and marginalized communities. And the state actions on that, there's New York State Community of Practice for Cultural and Linguistic Competence and IDD. There's also a really great Office of New Americans Ramirez June initiative. ONA also has a bilingual coordinator program. And then CDD has been doing a lot of great work in this area, including an Ensuring Access grant. There have been surveys and focus groups, data collected and redesigned. And from that data collected, we redesigned the OPWDD front door sessions to be more accessible. And they're developing a methodology for a policy audit through the Georgetown evaluation. And the Gender Recognition Act of Asian American Data Desegregation Act went into effect. So there's been a lot more data coming out from that. And additionally, same thing as what I just reviewed, the board had a couple of presentations related to this. Additionally, on data, the autism cost study report we reviewed, and within the 507 plan, we reviewed OPWDD's goals to continue equal access to services. I don't want to toot our DEI office's horn too much, but the amount of stuff they had that could have been included here, and that's only our agency. There's a ton of other agencies that have been doing work. So the report will reflect all of that great progress that has been made. So these two both kind of center around DEI, but the first one is more about engaging stakeholders into the input process that have previously lacked equitable access to services. And then number 12 is more about looking at data and reviewing policies and procedures to make services more accessible.
What is GU-NCCC?
It's the Georgetown Georgetown University, excuse me. Do you know what NCCU is?
National Center.
The National Center for Cultural Competence. It's a partnership with OPWDD. I believe it was used through ARPA dollars, so we can review our service system and see how to be more equitable and provide services to folks that might have lacked access previously.
So one question I have, given all the news and political rancor, have we had any pushback over this, the DEI stuff?
I'm sorry?
Have we had any pushback over the DEI, given the rancor all over the news nationally and town?
No, it's been really progressive and positive work in this area, I think.
I was just wondering because of how controversial it's been nationally.
No, thankfully we have had really great work happen here.
I do think given the potential for a change in direction on DEIA matters at the federal level, which is likely given the previous history of the president-elect, I do think it's important that this board retained some recommendations in this area to ensure that we express our views of the importance of this work and try to shore it up in New York State, because I do anticipate erosion at the federal level, unfortunately. And that could impact some of the work that we do here in New York, because some of the work that gets done, CDD is a good example, our Ramirez June initiative, other initiatives that we have in the DEIA area, that's all federally supported with federal funding. So there is a real possibility for erosion.
And I would concur with Kristen that makes, I think, our work all the more important at the state level.
So is the suggestion to keep these separate and as they are?
I don't feel strongly about whether they're separate as they have been or if they're combined, but I definitely think that we want to have a continued focus in this area, regardless of what happens at the federal level.
100%.
Actually, kind of speaking of that, do we actually have like how much, and this is probably my own ignorance, like how much is like federally supported and how much is state? Like, do we actually have a breakdown of that?
Council on Developmental Disabilities is 100% federally funded.
So that might be something we maybe want to add in there, like some, I don't know how to word it, but like kind of making sure that we could, maybe we flip to state support, or recommend, preservation of these regardless of, funding or what, yeah.
I definitely hear what you're saying. I don't know how we would word it. It's tricky because in some instances, with some federal funds, there's a possibility that if you support DEI work, you could lose the federal funding just by simply saying you support it. So I think we should continue to support it, but I don't know. It's a tricky issue.
Okay. Does anyone else online have any comments on these? Okay, so I think as it stands, we'll keep both separate and see if maybe we can clear up the focus area, but they're definitely worthwhile to both keep in here. Next slide, please. Okay, so before I go into the 3 new ones, I just want to very briefly go over the other sections and appendixes that will be included here. So recent statutory changes of interest to the advisory board, the law outlining the authority and creation of the board, the family support groups list as previously mentioned. And again, shout out to anyone watching who was part of a family group. Please email us about your group just to make sure that you're included as a resource. And we will be additionally posting that on the website separate to the report. And then a list of autism resources and research institutions, which includes different subsections for education, employment, providers, journals, newsletters, foundations, basically any information that could be relevant we want to add in here. Do any board members think there are other appendixes or resources that we could include that would be helpful?
One area I think that we should look at is in this legislation in New York with Assemblywoman Paul and Senator Violman, and I've talked to Assemblywoman Paul, is the assisted suicide, because I recently read about a woman in Canada, 27 or so, who decided she wanted to end her life and have assisted suicide because she was depressed and unhappy with autism. Her father sued to stop it. The court ruled that it was her autonomy, her right to assisted suicide. And there's been concerns about that within the autism and disability communities in New York with the legislation. I discussed it with Assemblywoman Paul. It hasn't been passed yet, but it's something I think that we need to have on our radar to discuss working with them to avoid what's happening. They say there are safeguards, but this woman in Canada, which would be similar to the US, found 2 doctors to sign off on her committee assisted suicide with no physical health issues.
I think if that law, if that ever becomes close to becoming a law in New York State, we can address that, but I'm not sure if at this time that would be helpful to include as another section or appendix. Courtney, please correct me if you feel differently.
I agree.
It was an idea, at least I thought, to put on the radar.
Yeah, it's good to have on the radar.
For sure. Well, if anyone thinks of anything in the meantime, please reach out. Next slide, please. Okay, so the new ones. Next slide, please. So number 1, I think we have heard, it's kind of crazy that we don't already have a recommendation related to workforce with how all of these things are, the backbone is workforce. And I think everyone on this board is very aware of the shortage there, and it's affecting every corner of this system. So strengthening and maintaining the direct care workforce would be the overarching recommendation, but wanted to ask folks what specific focus areas or ideas you'd include in this. I did want to note we want to clearly mention both self-direction staff and certified staff, because we do hear sometimes when you're talking about direct care workforce, it's very focused on the certified, but we also know that it's very hard to hire staff in the self-direction for yourself right now, so we want to focus on both sides. But what other areas or ideas do you guys have?
There's a whole body of existing information as to how to retain staff. I mean, there's just so much of it out there right now. Are you saying just for this group, what should be focused on here, correct?
Yeah, what would the board recommend within the types of work are so like maybe reviewing different retention and recruitment strategies and seeing data wise what best works, and
it would be good to see the data. I think that could inform this committee as to what's going, the board as to what's going on. Even though there's a lot of data out there, and I know that they collect data on an ongoing basis, but it'd be great to get a presentation on that data, so have a better understanding. Though I look at it a great deal, there's also some demographics information about the state of New York that's kind of making this even worse and worse and worse when it comes to supporting individuals with autism, or and trying to retain folks to be direct support folks. there's a lot of people leaving the state, and the bottom line is that a lot of those folks are the people who would be the DSPs. So, and then there's an aging population that goes along with that, which means that there's more need for that medical. And then there's the mental health issues that are out there that also draw folks with a limited pool of individuals that are there to support them. So, I think it's a big issue. It's a huge issue. I think it's a lot of things to try to tackle.
I also think there should be more onus on the financial intermediaries from a self-directed standpoint to do more training. I know when I get self-direction staff through, my financial intermediary, it does not seem like there's much training that happens at all, and the training really comes back to me or others members of the team that has, training from a certified setting.
There isn't a lot of information out there. As a recipient of self-direction myself. I have had to switch brokers and FIs a few times. And of course, it's a long process to do that. ResHab and all these other people, you can have a broker, the broker recommends an FI, the FI might help, or the broker might recommend a ResHab person, but it's their recommendation. It's not like a list of ResHab people. There is a list of FIs and brokers, but there's not a lot of information who's better at working with what population and so on. It would be great if there was more information, especially on the people who come to my home.
I'd actually like to invite someone in that can explain really what the role of a financial intermediary truly is. Because from FI to FI, it's very different. They seem to have their own definitions, or they seem to have their own explanation of what the responsibility is or isn't.
I think that's a good idea, Charlie.
Great, thank you for that feedback. So it seems like one of the focus areas would definitely be training. And then Charlie, we will take that idea and see if we can get an FI to speak about the role of FI or brokers and that overall. Would we want to do any focus on certification or like a career ladder for folks in the direct care industry? Because I know sometimes a lot of DSPs are a DSP and then they don't see a career ladder, and that can sometimes cause folks to leave the industry and go to different jobs where they do have step ups. So just a thought, maybe with a focus on future progress for people.
There's been a lot of work done on career ladders. I think the big issue with career ladders is funding.
To pay for
it. Yeah, so I think that's a roadblock. Doesn't mean that people haven't found ways around it, but it is a major obstacle to that. So.
But I would be supportive of the I get the point about the difficulty and the barriers we run into, but I would be supportive of the recommendation because it's a good way to keep people. And I think coming up with the core competencies that people need to have at different levels is one way of hopefully trying to elevate what they're doing and allow them to advance in their careers. And I think some of the recent work that OPWDD has done with State University of New York to allow for micro-credentials for DSPs is an example of one of the ways that hopefully helps with retention. So Alexia, I do like your idea.
They also have a journeyman program that's out now also that sorts folks who are professionals in the field that allow them to go with their training from one place to another. There's a lot out there right now. All those things we're talking about are kind of in the mix right now. So I don't know how to generalize that to this. I think it's covered here, strengthening and maintaining the direct care workforce. You can bullet it out, career tracks, and all the other pieces. Maybe that's a way to do it.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. But you're right, there's a lot.
Alexia, does OPWDD hold any kind of annual DSP conference where they can all come together and learn best methods or just enhance their learning skills?
So we do not as an agency, but there are multiple organizations that hold different trainings, and I think there's one held by the NADSP national organization.
And there's also the local New York Alliance and
Yeah.
some of the other groups that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. In the essence of time, I'm going to move on to proposed recommendation 2, but it sounds like no one is against including workforce because it kind of touches on everything we talk about. Thank you. So number 2, supporting neurodiversity, self-advocacy, and awareness. The board has actually taken some actions on this so far through its neurodiversity flag efforts and the expansion of the self-advocacy committee. And we did already decide earlier to combine this with rec number 3, which was establishing family support groups with a focus area on awareness and acceptance of ASD and eligibility. So do you think this is fine as it is, or are there any focus areas or ideas you want to include within this?
So
I don't have any thoughts off the top of my head. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, maybe we should put in a caveat too about encouraging agencies to actually work with self-advocates, especially when it comes to like for example, Department of Homeland Security. If you're writing an emergency plan, you have a question about, I don't know, autism. Kind of really connecting the self-advocates into the agencies at like a little more, I guess, like intimate level. Just kind of really get the self-advocate community to actually have that access to people is something that's very important. Like, yes, the board gives an opportunity for that too, but also just kind of like when I was working directly with Homeland Security on that, working on the Citizen Preparedness Corps, there was a lot. It was a great experience for both ends. And kind of getting that more collaboration is, I think, something that's very important.
Thank you, Mike. Mike, next slide, please. So proposed recommendation 3 is health equity and access to healthcare for people with ASD with a focus area on dental services, women's health services, and education of clinical professionals. We decided earlier not to combine with 7 and leave that as its own. There have been an increase in intention and need for better health equity options for people with autism. For example, right now it can be very, very difficult to get a dental appointment. For someone who doesn't have autism, but for someone with autism who may be nonverbal or needs sedation, it could be years and years and years. And that sometimes the behavior is just because they might have some tooth pain. So that's really a lot. We've been hearing a lot more about that, and women's health services and lack of lifts in doctor's office to get people onto tables for accurate checkups, excuse me. So really health equity and access to healthcare. So any thoughts on this, ideas, focus areas?
I think dental is such an important component to health. It's not even about, you mentioned the pain, but it can lead to other conditions that if they'd been taken care of earlier, they would not have ended up with that condition. It's really difficult to get access to services, and that doesn't seem to be improving, even with the focus on it. So I think dental care is a really important component.
Yeah, but from my own personal experience, I've been struggling with that for about 20-something years. And I'm paying the price for it now, because now to actually get my dental work fixed properly, it's going to be close to almost 6 figures when all the procedures and stuff are done. And it was simple stuff that was available to me when I was in college. You know, I didn't have a dental plan, stuff that could have been addressed back then, just because there was no access. I wouldn't be in that boat right now.
I certainly agree that access to dental care has gotten more difficult for individuals with DD over the last several years. I think that's true across the population, for the general population as well. And given the additional time and challenges that can be faced by dental professionals to serve people with DD, I think that just compounds the problem, right? If everyone in the general population struggles to get into the dentist and have timely access to appropriate dental care, which is the case throughout New York State now, certainly since the onset of the pandemic, the challenges for the DD community have only expanded. I mean, I do want to just point out that there have been some interesting innovations in the dental field. The Center for Disability Services here in Albany, through its incubator center, has developed a device that can help caregivers to assist people with DD to do daily maintenance on their teeth. And we at the CDD sponsored a grant with Truro College to try to increase education about proper just day-to-day dental routines, to try to help a little bit as well. But certainly a renewed focus, I think, is in order.
Jill, and I totally agree with what Patrick and Kristen talking about. This is just a critical area, and it's one to continue on, significant focus to leverage any change.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, so it sounds like this one is good as it stands. Okay. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, can you go back for a moment? If I do want to open it up, we do only have 10 minutes we can go over. But if any of the board members have a proposal that's completely outside of the realm of what we've talked about today, that's still on the table, please reach out to me and we can discuss with the chair and the board members and get it to be in the report. So don't think that these are the only potential proposed ones. If you have something in your brain, please let us know. Next slide, please. In the interest of time, I'm going to do this in about 20 seconds. And send this out to all the board members. We've had really great progress with the neurodiversity flag. Josh, Kate, and a bunch of other members have really been helped spread the flag and materials across the state. About half of our posters, magnets, and stickers have been distributed. A lot of that was brought to the Sandy's conference, where state self-advocates come from across the state to Albany, and they loved it. We really got a lot of materials out there. We've sent materials to providers, self-advocates that have requested them, and advocacy groups, all in different parts of the state. Most of the OPWD leadership has the flag displayed behind them when they're in meetings. It's in our conference room. And anyone who's watching who has requests for materials, we do have a lot of flags left. If you have a flagpole and you could fly it and you have a space for it, happy to give you one. Our email is listed on the screen. It is asdadvisoryboard@opwdd.ny.gov. And we are working to continue more flag raisings and sending to more elected officials. But here are just some brief photos of flag being flown. Next slide, please. Okay, so next year's meetings, these are the tentative dates. Everyone who's a board member, you will get a calendar invite for all of these by the end of the week. Not going to read out every day, but there is one on January 7th, April 8th, July 22nd, and November 5th. I'll leave this up for a moment if people want to take a picture or write it down. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we are going to go into public comment. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand and we will call on you. When it is your turn to speak, you'll get a request if you're on virtually asking you to unmute, at which point you can speak. We do ask everyone to keep their comments to 3 minutes. And please note, this is not a question and answer period, but if you want to, if you want to email the board and if you want to ask direct questions, I can try and work through that via email. And we do have people in person. And Courtney, we do have a couple in-person public comments here in Albany, so we're going to start with that.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Make sure it's on. No. Try.
I think it's on. Thank you to this board for affording the time for public comments. I'd like to speak briefly about DIR floor time. I'm Gretchen Kamke, an occupational therapist who holds an expert certificate through ICDL, the International Council for Development and Learning. I've had the privilege of working with countless families using DIR floor time and seeing the impressive results. People often refer to it as magic, as you heard Kate say this earlier, but magic isn't real. It's intentionality. DIR floor time is about intentionally joining people where they are and attuning to their individual differences to support development, building on their strengths and supporting them to be the truest and most comfortable versions of themselves. I also have the privilege of teaching therapists, educators, parents, and other service providers how to implement DIR floor time into their work. Someone asked me this week what my favorite part about teaching floor time was, and my immediate answer was seeing seasoned clinicians be excited about the growth that they are seeing once they've implemented floor time with clients that they've been stuck with using other approaches. DIR is a person-centered developmental intervention that promotes growth and development and inevitably impacts the behaviors that we see on the surface. I don't focus on behaviors much, but I always see them shift using floor time. I know that caregivers of autistic individuals with high support needs are often worried about quote unquote aggression, but often those aggressive behaviors we see are related to stressed nervous systems. And as humans, we are wired to protect ourselves and keep us feeling safe. But safety isn't about logic, it's about perception. And as you know, many autistic individuals have individual differences related to how they process sensation, impacting their perception of safety, as well as how confidently they communicate their needs, wishes, and desires. DIR floor time is about supporting that perception of safety and strengthening however they are communicating in order to create opportunities to grow, knowing that relationships and not behaviors are the driver of development. We don't teach people how to be a person. People develop in the context of relationship. So if someone has a biological difference related to them feeling comfortable within relationships, that's where we have to start. There's a federal initiative for person-centered services, and after looking through the New York State behavior regulations and the home and community-based standards, I'm confident that if OPWDD embraced DIR floor time, that it can support all service providers within OPWDD feeling more confident providing care to autistic individuals receiving services within New York State. There was a lot of discussion about training today, and I think DIR floor time training can greatly support your initiatives. It would also support your proposed recommendation to strengthen and maintain your certified and self-directed staff. Floor time empowers caregivers and staff because they become more competent in the services that they are providing. While I could spend a considerable amount of time highlighting why I truly think DIR floor time is more efficacious than what is currently covered by insurance and Medicaid in New York, what I really want to advocate for is choice. Parents and individuals deserve a choice in what type of services they can access for their families and for themselves, and currently they do not have that. New York State has the potential to pass legislation that would provide life-changing care to autistic New Yorkers and their families by providing them the right to choose DIR floor time. Let's set an example for the rest of the country and add this person-centered service as an option for families and individuals. On the call right now is Jeff Gunzel, the CEO of the International Council of Development and Learning, who played an integral role in the process of New Jersey providing a comprehensive DIR benefit from Medicaid, and I know that he would be happy to assist in the process for New York State. I encourage you to advocate and support legislation that would increase access to DIR floor time, and I'd be happy to chat more with anyone who is willing to listen. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have a couple more in person here in Albany, Courtney.
Hi, my name is Melissa Sinapori. I work at the Rebecca School utilizing the DIR floor time methodology.
Move your phone down a little.
Yeah.
It's too high for you.
Can you hear me now? Great. Okay. At Rebecca School, I run a parent support group, and I've received a couple of statements, and I'm here to read the letters from the parents. I'm going to read one in full. I have many, but I think it's important to get one message across fully. And if possible, I could send the other letters that I have to the board. But this is a letter from Tony Williams, who's a mother of her son, Ethan Melendez, who attends Rebecca School. And her letter states, as a mother of a nonverbal son with autism, I cannot express strongly enough how vital DIR floor time has been for him and for our family. This approach isn't just beneficial, it's essential. In a world where communication often feels out of reach for my son, floor time has provided a way for him to connect and express himself in ways that standard therapies could never unlock. For families like mine, where every interaction and breakthrough is a hard-won victory, floor time is not a luxury, it's a lifeline. Without floor time, my son would remain isolated without a meaningful way to reach out, or be reached. Through floor time, he has learned to engage and share moments with me, not through words, but through smiles, eye contact, and gestures, each of which feels like a gift. We need Medicaid to recognize this therapy as the necessity it is. Families like mine, already facing incredible financial and emotional challenges, should not have to struggle to access what has become a critical tool in our child's life and development. For so many children who cannot express themselves verbally, floor time provides a voice. We urge you to support the bill to give our children the chance to connect, to grow, and to thrive. Please help us make DIR floor time accessible through Medicaid. It is quite simply a matter of our children's futures. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more in person.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, my name is Tony Titora. I am an occupational therapist. I'm also the clinical director at the Rebecca School and a training leader for ICDL. And a couple of us have mentioned this bill, and I really want to talk about that for a second. We are focused on amending a law in New York State that will include DIR floor time and other developmental approaches. Because right now, like we've said, ABA is the only approved methodology. So when your child gets diagnosed with autism, you're given this 30, 40 hours a week of ABA services as your only option. We really feel that DIR floor time should be part of the approaches that support people, families with autism. And I'm going to quickly read a little, it's called our elevator speech, because we will be lobbying for this bill in New York State in January. Every day, countless individuals and families face limited access to approaches for support of autism and related diagnoses. The number of New Yorkers on the autism spectrum is increasing. Between 2015 and 2020, the number of individuals served by OPWDD with a primary diagnosis of autism increased from 20,789 people to 27,434 people. This is a 7.2% annual rate of increase. And if this were to continue, OPWDD would serve approximately 38,800 people on the autism spectrum by 2025. This increase cost OPWDD and New York State funding $365 million because the only supports that are given right now are ABA as the only choice. DIR floor time is more beneficial for financial reasons. And it's because we don't just do the services as a provider, we train the families and we ask the families to go back home and play and engage, play with a purpose in a meaningful way with their children. And it's not something that we keep and we just let ourselves as providers practice. We share it amongst anybody who's working with a child. And that's really important and really helps cut the cost of these services. ABA and DIR floor time are fundamentally different, but we're not saying don't do ABA. We're not saying don't allow ABA. We're saying we want parents and families and advocates to have a choice, and that's really important for us. The American Medical Association in 2023 included their support to cover and reimburse evidence-based services for autism spectrum disorders. And this is really important because they removed ABA and put in other stakeholders who would be then allowed to advocate for services. And we want DIR floor time to be one of those stakeholders. Thank you.
Okay, that was everyone in person here in Albany. It looks like we have a couple hands raised online. We are a couple minutes over, but it just looks like 2 hands, so I'm gonna let everyone speak. Dr. Lauren Tobing Puente, excuse me if I pronounced that wrong, you should be getting a request to unmute. You are unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yep, now we can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for allowing me the chance to speak. I know we're over, so I'll be as brief as possible. I'm a clinical psychologist in Queens and Manhattan, and I've been providing services to the autistic community since I was in undergrad in 1995, but since being a licensed psychologist since 2005. And I'm the owner and clinical director of a private practice, Connected Growth and Wellbeing. I actually started out in undergrad as an ABA therapist, but learned DIR floor time along the way over the past couple of decades, and really saw how DIR floor time changes not just for the better the autistic individuals themselves, but for their families. I work directly with parents and children together and help parents figure out how to connect with their children in ways that support the children and even young adults as well, focusing on their relationship, how to connect with the family members, and it really helps to develop their self-advocacy and independence. I've seen how this helps parents develop their confidence, decrease their own levels of stress, and increase the family's well-being. It really supports acceptance in the family for who the children are and what their needs are. I've run a free parent support group, which is actually open to all New York State parents of kids with autism. Over the past 2 years, we've had over 60 people attend, and one of the resounding messages is that parents need more choice. The individuals we serve need more choice. They need more access to services. They're struggling to find after-school programs, care providers through OPWDD who use a child-centered neuro-affirming approach like DIR floor time. They're desperately searching for things that are covered through insurance because obviously their pockets are not that deep. With that, I ask this board to please support the New York State Bill A7913/S5393, as this would provide more access to the well-needed services. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Jeffrey G, you should be getting a request to unmute. You are unmuted.
Hello, my name is Dr. Jeff Gunzel. I am the CEO of the International Council on Development and Learning. I am a mental health clinician as far as my profession, but I've been in leadership roles for the last 20 years. It was the quick background. I was the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Children and Families in New Jersey and oversaw autism services within the state of New Jersey in that role. I'm not going to repeat everything everyone said. I want to keep this really short. I will say clinically, it is some of the best work that I've ever done being engaged in floor time, and seeing the outcomes are really, really impressive. And we have plenty to support that from a research standpoint and all of that, the things that have been talked about. And Kate's presentation clearly showed that. The thing that I want to really make clear to this group is that this states that have supported DIR, so New Jersey was the first state that implemented a comprehensive DIR Medicaid package, and other states have followed. Minnesota has followed, Illinois has followed, and I think others will now that we have it through CMS. Other states are following that. And this is an area that I've done a lot of work with Medicaid, and I wasn't working for the state at the time this went through, but I did a lot of work with the state to support how we can make this all happen. The beautiful part is floor time is not more expensive than other options. If anything, it's much more inexpensive. It's much more cost effective. So from a New York State standpoint, the state can offer a new benefit to the residents of the state without increasing expenditures. So the state of New Jersey did not get an expenditure increase in order to add the benefit. Because the reality is, while some parents may start doing both ABA and DIR, generally they will gravitate towards what fits better for them. And if they gravitate to DIR, they're going to end up it'll end up costing less as a parent implemented, parent mediated approach. So it is a wonderful option for the state in regards to being able to, in difficult financial times, offer more choice to parents, offer more services to be available, yet not increase expenses. And that's the main point that I want to get across in addition to everything else that's been added. And the final thing I'll say is you have my contact information for registering for this. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with anyone about the logistics of doing all of this and the mechanics behind it and anything in regards to certifying professionals, because that's what we do as an organization. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your comments. Thank you for joining. We have one more, and then we're going to wrap up. Kathy F.
I'm Kathy Flinchy. I'm also a DIR floor time provider and expert trainer through ICDL. And again, there's been so much spoken today about DIR floor time. And I just wanted to highlight the relationships because everyone listening and in this room has relationships, and it is the power of relationships that makes floor time work. And I just wanted to comment that when we can have a relationship with a child and a family and support the joy and connection, we can really highlight and help families understand how to recreate these moments for further practice in their own home, to create joy in their own home, to decrease the stress that they might be having about what's happening with their child's development. And so I just wanted to highlight the development relationships as being so powerful and attuning to everyone's unique differences can make such a huge piece for powerful a powerful impact on families. And what I really enjoy is watching the ability for parents to be able to reflect and recognize what they're doing in the process and how they're understanding their child better as a result of training and practicing DIR floor time with a professional. So it's hard to top all of the amazing things that people have shared today, but I just couldn't sit here in silence. So thanks for listening.
Thank you. So that will end public comment. Courtney, are you still on, or did you have to hop off? Can you switch the slide, please? Okay. Well, I'm sure Courtney will say thank you everyone for their engagement and participation. I know we went 10 minutes over, so I'm sure that's why people had to hop off. But really appreciate the feedback, and I will get to work on incorporating all of that, and then it will be shared with the state agency partners and board members, and then hopefully published. So thank you so much, and thanks again to Kate and all the DIR floor time folks that came to the meeting today. Really appreciate your participation. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great rest of your year and holiday season. See you in the new year.